going to have a 2-minute warning.
Okay.
2-minute warning.
Okay.
Justin, do you mind checking the one up at the podium real quick? Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right, call the meeting to order. Good to see all the members of the committee here this morning. Thank you all for coming down to metropolis of Moultrie, Georgia, my hometown. I've been here for about 6 or 7 generations, kind of lost count, but been here a long time. It's a great place. I'm glad to show it off a little bit today to members of the committee, members of the audience, and glad y'all are here. So again, we're just thankful for the members of the committee to be here and for this important topic we're going to cover today. I do want to thank our host. I know Jim Glass is here somewhere. Thank you, Jim. SRTC, Amy Carter, former member. We've also got, if Pierre is in here somewhere, Pierre Rogers with all the audio visual. Pierre was my swim coach about 40 years ago. Still helping me out. I appreciate that, Pierre. Might have some local legislators here today. Any county commissioners, city councilmen? I know I saw Commissioner Martin DeMont in here earlier. See here, Commissioner DeMont. Some fellow state legislators. I think I saw. I don't think John Corbett's here. Is John Corbett here anywhere? I don't see him anywhere. Yes. Welcome to Moultrie for those that are in the surrounding areas. I think Joe Campbell and Richard Roy are watching on TV. I want to let the mayor of Moultrie do a quick introduction, welcome to Moultrie, and followed by Judd Lassiter, 2 important folks in the community. We've had 2 mayors over the last 80-something years in Moultrie, 2, and one of them is here today. He's in his 42nd year of being a mayor of Moultrie, Georgia, so pretty impressive, and I want to let him give a welcome to the committee, and then followed up by Judd Lassiter from Lassiter Tractor Company. Then we'll kind of get into kind of the details of the meeting, and then get to our first witness. So, Mayor, floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone. It is a great privilege and honor to welcome this distinguished group to Moultrie, Georgia. I understand that what you'll be talking about is water and agriculture, that background, and you've come to the right place. Moultrie, Cosway County is our biggest economic impact is agriculture in this community. It's over $1.5 billion of farm gate, hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's the backbone of our economy here in Moultrie. We've had a long history of agriculture diversification. In fact, we're known as really the most diversified agricultural county east of the Mississippi. We're proud of that. We have some great farmers, great farm families, and we are glad that you're here today to talk about water, because agriculture is so important to us, and water is a great component of that, our industry. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for all of your attention today. And speaking of history, it's an interesting fact that in 1910, Colquitt County had the first county agent in the state of Georgia. And this gentleman, the first one, he developed a system, a 5-year program of diversification for crops in our agricultural base here. And that has grown over the years, and it has paid tremendous dividends for our community. So thank you for being here. Thank you for studying the issue of water, and we just want to keep it coming. Thank y'all. Have a great meeting and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. All right, I want to ask Judd Lassiter to say a few words too, from just kind of welcome the committee to Moultrie, and appreciate all the work you do locally, Judd, and turn the floor over to you.
Good morning, all. Some of you all I have met in the past. I'm Judd Lassiter, General Manager of Lassiter Tractor Company here in Moultrie, Georgia. I'm a fourth generation John Deere dealer, as well as a third generation farmer. The latter probably a little more important, a little more proud of, actually. And my family, Chaz has us beat. We've been here for 4 generations, and try to be very active in the community, try to do what we can do to push the agenda of agriculture. You know, as I look at the group today and the importance around the topics today, we're talking about the #1 industry in Georgia, and we're talking about the #2 agricultural input in ag production. Water's the single most important thing after you plant that seed. So today's a very important day. I think it's important for us as citizens and you all, and as well as your constituents, to always remember that we're always stakeholders when it comes to ag. Everyone is a stakeholder in ag, whether you're going to the grocery store or you're getting dressed in the morning, as well as downtown merchants and everybody that's in the periphery in our rural communities. So that's one thing that's incumbent upon all of us, to always make sure that people understand the importance of agriculture, both from a state level and a federal level. But just want to welcome you all to Colquitt County, and go Packers.
Thank you, Judd. All right, we're going to get into the meeting. I wanted to cover, we had our first meeting in Douglasville on, I think, July 17th, if I'm not mistaken. And we covered data centers. We'll have one briefing today from Christopher Nunn. There's a holdover from that meeting on data centers. But I just want to remind the committee of the questions we're trying to ask about water. And those are: what and where are the major sources of water in our state? How much of the water sources in our state are being used on a day-to-day, month-to-month, and year-to-year basis? Who is using it? And are we accurately capturing, reporting, and monitoring the data for those who are using it? And although we may have adequate water sources today, how will our state be able to meet the demand over the next 20, 30 years, given the amount of growth this state is seeing currently? So those are the questions we're trying to identify or solve. And we're going to have 5 witnesses today. We'll have Christopher Nunn, Mark Masters from the Planning Council. We'll have Georgia Farm Bureau, Georgia Forestry Association, Georgia Agribusiness Council. The committee will have lunch, and we'll do a site visit. So just a reminder for the presenters: 10 to 15 minutes of testimony, followed up by 5 or 10 minutes of questions from the committee. And then once we kind of get done with the presenters, we'll have a public comment period. And for those in public comment, try and keep your comments 5 minutes or less. All right, any questions from the committee? All right, before we do that, I want to introduce the committee to y'all. And if we can start from our right and go to the left, we'll do that, and then we'll jump into Mr. Christopher Nunn.
Chairman Robert Dickey from Muzola, Georgia. I'm also a farmer, growing a few peaches up there. And Mr. Chairman, glad to be a part of this committee and glad to be here today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Representative Carmen Rice. I represent Muskogee and Harris County. Just finished my first session and honored to be here and learn more about our resources.
Good morning, everyone, and it's great to see such a good crowd here today. To our chairman, thank y'all for coming. I'm Representative Lynn Smith, and I'm chair of the House Natural Resource and Environment Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shaw Blackman from Houston County. Pleasure to be in Moultrie and join the rest of the panel here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Matt Hatchett from Dublin, represent Lawrence and Johnson County. Just glad to be here and enjoyed a great breakfast with the chairman this morning.
Thank you, Chairman Hatchett. Chaz Cannon from Moultrie, District 172, Colquitt County, Thomas County, and Cook County.
Bill Workheiser, Chair Industry and Labor, and I represent Tattnall, Evans, Jeff Davis, and Appling County.
Brad Thomas, District 21, Cherokee County. I'm also the chairman of the Special Committee on Management.
David Huddleston, District 72, which is Carroll, Heard, and Troup County, and I'm actually a poultry cattle farmer myself up in that part of the country.
Good morning, I'm Teddy Reese, House District 140, Columbus, Georgia. It's always a pleasure to be in Moultrie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your hospitality. Great event last night, and I don't expect anything less from my Leadership Georgia classmate.
Thank y'all. I'm glad y'all are here. And just a couple of housekeeping items. Restroom is out this door to your right. For members and staff, the committee got some snacks and drinks back here. If you need to step out, right back here. And then we'll try and end up around 12:15, 12:30. Have lunch in this room behind us. And then we'll leave here about 1:15, head out to Bart Davis's farm. So that's kind of where we stand right now, and we'll jump into it. So Christopher Nunn, Commissioner, Department of Community Affairs.
Thank you all so much. It's great to be with you today. I'm Christopher Nunn. I'm from Houston County, and I live in Atlanta. And it's a pleasure to be here. Y'all have a great agenda focused on an essential component to Georgia's #1 industry. I apologize that I've got a meeting in Tifton after this, and I am here to do just, I think, a little bit of cleanup following your last meeting. I believe there was some confusion that arose in the last meeting, and some of that stemmed perhaps from an AJC article that was posted on the same day of your meeting, the headline of which was, "Why has a Georgia agency paused review of new data centers?" And the first line said, "The DCA directive is not a moratorium." Well, first of all, I will let you know, and we tried to clarify this with AJC, DCA doesn't issue any directives. The data centers aren't a part of the DRI process, and certainly the state does not institute moratoriums. So I thought it might be helpful just to really quickly give you a brief overview of the DRI process, since there were a lot of questions. I'm joined today by my colleague Ryan Evans. She hails also from Middle Georgia and Macon. While I've got a bolt for a meeting in Tifton, if there are any follow-up questions, I'm sure Ryan will be happy to answer those, and you can certainly call me at any point in time. Really quickly, I'll try to keep under my 10 minutes, Mr. Chair. What is development? What is a development of regional impact? These are anything ranging from a large-scale housing development to a large wastewater treatment facility, large-scale industrial development. These are just a handful of examples. But you may be asking, well, why does Georgia have a policy about developments of regional impact? And it's very simple. This is a communication process. It's not a regulation process. And in the Planning Act, or subsequent to the Planning Act of 1989, the development of regional impact, or DRI process, was instituted to ensure intergovernmental communication on projects that might tax resources beyond the local entity, beyond a local community. So this simply ensures that neighbors are talking to neighbors, that cities are talking to counties, that other stakeholders are engaged in a process. Again, it's about communication, not regulation. So what is the process? Colors here, green represents the state, DCA. Red represents the regional commissions, and blue represents the local governments. Simply put, at the very left-hand side, as a local government, if you have a development that is taking place in your community that qualifies as a development of regional impact, you simply go into a portal that is hosted by DCA, but that immediately transmits your information to the local regional commission. And over a brief 30-day period, the regional commission informs all of the interested stakeholders, your neighboring governments, the Corps of Engineers, whoever might be an involved stakeholder about the project, and they simply submit information back in that the regional commission compiles and provides to the state, to the local government, and to the stakeholders. The local government is left with all of the decision-making here. So at the far right-hand end of the process, all of that information goes back to the local government. Local government can continue to be doing any permitting or whatnot through this 30-day period, and DCA gets a report. We're simply a repository for that information. So what constitutes a DRI project? There is a list in rule of 19 different things that qualify under DRI. There are details behind each of these. For example, under commercial here, in rural parts of the state, any development of 175,000 square feet or that involves more than 10,000 trips per day would qualify as a DRI. In a metropolitan area, that's 300,000 square feet or 10,000 trips. On the housing front, in a metro area, anything with more than 400 lots would qualify as a DRI. In a rural area, it's 125 lots. There's detail behind each of these 19, but you can go down the list and imagine for yourself how each of these, building an airport probably has some impact on the region beyond just the local entity. Again, not taking any control away from locals to make local decisions, but just ensuring that all of the interested parties are communicated with. So when you look at this list, and I know specifically in your last meeting you were talking about the topic of data centers, you will notice that nowhere in this list does data center exist. Okay? So the point of confusion at your last meeting was that we were taking some affirmative action to make a decision one way or the other on data centers, and we simply were highlighting that it's not on the list yet. So what's the current state of the DRI process? Regional commissions, there are 12 in the state, receive approximately 100 to 150 of these notifications that trigger a no more than 30-day process every year. The Atlanta Regional Commission gets the bulk of those, and the other 11 each range. I was talking with the Southwest Regional Commission here earlier this morning. They said they may get 5 a year. Okay? The rules for this program have not been updated since 2014, and they are currently out for public comment. That perhaps is what triggered the article that led to the discussion last go-round. The only update in these rules would be the addition of technology centers, the addition of solar power generation facilities, and there's data behind each of those. I think that with the solar power generation facilities, it's larger than 300 acres or 500 acres, depending on urban or metro. And then a revision of the truck stop criteria, because quite frankly, over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of evolution there. And the intent is not to create work. It is simply to make sure that communities are communicating with one another. In the new rules that are out for public comment currently, it reaffirms roles and responsibilities. Local government is responsible for making decisions and submitting to the process. The regional commissions are responsible for coordinating the process and engaging all the stakeholders. DCA is simply responsible for outlining the process and serving as a repository for information at the state. Happy to answer any questions. Hopefully that clarifies some of the confusion at the last meeting. I'm looking down. I don't see any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from the committee? Chairman Smith.
I have one. Thank you for the clarification and getting on that. For the general public, how do they follow this to the end? I mean, once these things have been checked off, what would Joe Public do to understand what's going on?
So you certainly could engage with the regional commission during the process or for the output. And I'm looking at Ryan, I know that we are the repository, so we can provide the final reports that come back to us. We're not involved in doing any of that legwork, but we are the repository for those reports. Yeah. And of course, thank you. Yeah, you can always go to the local government that requested it and ask them for the final report.
One more.
Chair Lady Smith.
So if I were in an area that a data center is being considered, my role would be to always stay in contact with my county commissioners for input there, and the county commissioners are receiving the research and the information from you. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Dickey, then I get you, Teddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. When your department classifies a project as a DRI, do you have a list, public list, of which projects that your department is engaged with, either through grants or whatever process? How many DRI projects would Department of Community Affairs be involved with right now?
So we aren't engaged with the entities, the regional commissions are. I've mentioned up here that over the last 5 years, on average, between 100 and 150 projects would come through the portal and go through the process. And so I would imagine, I don't have the numbers in terms of how many are currently in that 30-day window versus how many have been processed by the regional commissions and submitted by local governments over the last 6 months or 8 months. But I can get you that information. Ryan, can you help me follow up on that?
I guess my question is, at what point does DCA get involved in these projects, and how long do you stay involved, and what levels of participation do you
With
engage
apologies
with?
to everybody who's on the line, I'm going to run to the screen. We receive the application, which is transmitted here, and we get a copy of the application at the end of the process. That's our involvement. That's the extent of DCA's involvement. All of the red is driven by the Middle Georgia Regional Commission or the Southwest Georgia Regional Commission or the Three Rivers Regional Commission on behalf of the local governments that they serve. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cleared up a lot. I know I had questions at the last meeting about that headline. It was quite catching. So of course, we're going to ask about it at the appropriate time. But just to make sure I understood fully today as I'm talking to people in the community about this process, if I'm not mistaken, you stated earlier that data centers are currently not a part of this process.
That's correct.
And in the update, which is currently going through the process, they will be included. Can you go back to that slide where you listed them?
This slide right here?
No, sir. That was right there.
Right
Yeah,
there.
you said, so the new update is going to add technology facilities, solar power generation facilities, and truck stop criteria. And right now, that's not in there.
That's correct.
So data centers currently in Georgia did not or have not been presenting a DRI.
That is correct, and I think it is worth a point of clarification. Some regional commissions, but not all, said, hey, we think they ought to be subject to DRI. And so they were going through that process. That's who brought this to our attention, and that is part of the catalyst behind the public comment period that we are going through.
But if we're following the rules as they are right now, they couldn't mandate them to go through that because that's not a part of our policy.
Correct. And it ought not be that a data center in 2 regions of the state are subjected to the DRI process and in 10 regions of the state are not subjected to the DRI process. So we simply are working through a rules clarification as to whether or not this 30-day period should apply.
And Commissioner, this is not a trick question, but I know sometimes we have difficulty with the media. How is it that it's possible for them to totally just, I guess, mislead with a headline like that if data centers were never even a part, or currently not a part, of our evaluation process? Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm trying to understand, how can you pause something that never started?
I'll let the commissioner answer that question.
I will let you all answer it for yourselves.
I just want to
So
make sure
thank
Mr.
you very
Chairman
much.
said I was in order with that question, Mr. Chairman. I'm asking for your approval to ask that question.
Go ahead.
I did not attend journalism school, and I do not have any insight as to how
So
such
nothing
occurred.
happened internally that would make somebody think that something is paused?
We simply highlighted the fact that there were regions in the state that were applying rules that didn't exist, and there were other regions in the state that were treating the same projects by a different set of rules, and that we should go through the rule revision process through a proper public comment period before that take place.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, you have some great people that work for you, and I'm sure they explained this process just as well as you did today, and I don't see how there could be any confusion with the way it was explained today. Thank you, sir.
Chairman Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a committee that's looking for answers, and it sounds like there's an avenue there to get us some that we're looking for. When do you expect this public comment period to end?
So I expect that it will run through, I don't have the precise date that it closes, but the early part of October. It's a prescribed 30-day process, and so it will, let's see, it'll be sometime in the latter part of September.
And at that point, how long does it usually take for you to update the rules, assuming that public comment's
So
positive?
the next DCA board meeting would be in mid-November. And so they would have to adopt any rules. That's a board level decision. So it would be most likely anything that would be changed through this process would take effect at the end of this year, beginning of the new calendar year.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, just
Yes, sir.
one more quick question. You said there is a couple regional commissions that are implementing these rules. Do you know which ones they are, by any chance?
I do not.
That's
I can
okay.
get that.
All right.
I can try to get that information for you.
That we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Issue of communication, I think what we're seeing with the data centers is some transparency issues. I think that we would agree with that. And communication can help solve some of those issues, especially amongst the locals, particularly when it comes to siting these data centers. So the more communication, the better. So maybe we'll see this incorporated as part of the DRI process going forward. I think more communication is always better. So.
Thank you for what y'all do. It's great to partner with y'all. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be there in Douglasville, but it's much better to be down in Moultrie and this part of the state. Thanks for having me.
I concur. Thank you, Commissioner Nunn. We appreciate it. Any further comments from the committee on this topic before we move on to our next witness? Mark, floor is all yours.
All right. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, and want to first start off by saying thank you for the importance that you place for this water subcommittee on agricultural water use. As we've heard from some of the folks that welcomed us here to Colquitt County, it's a big, big deal for our farmers, and it's a topic that I am passionate about personally as a farmer in Terrell County, about 60 miles northwest of here, but also professionally as the director of the Georgia Water Planning and Policy Center. It's a topic that I've spent most of my career working on, all the way back in 1999 when I started doing irrigation scheduling and stuff at the USDA Peanut Research Lab, and then moving over to the center in 2003 and been there ever since. The story that I want to tell in the next 10, 12 minutes is a good one. It is a story of a lot of folks doing an awful lot of work to put Georgia in a really good position with respect to its largest use of water. So why do we irrigate? Because it's a big, big deal. And even though we live in a relatively wet state, and I get to go around the country and I talk about irrigation and water use and all the things that we do here in Georgia to a lot of my friends out west, they're kind of incredulous, like, why do you have water issues? It rains 50 inches all the time, right? And I'm talking to people in an area where it rains 5. And compared to them, we don't have a water quantity issue in most years. But it can, in fact, get really dry. So this was the drought monitor in 2012. It was the second year of a back-to-back drought. Our friends from the northern part of the state, 2007 was a little bit worse. Down here in South Georgia, 11 and 12 back-to-back was, kind of our drought of record. And we saw record low flows, and in some cases, streams that completely dried up during that drought. So on the right, those red dots, red dot means bad. That means it's never been lower on that day in that stream before. So we need irrigation to help us get through these extreme drought events like 11 and 12. I would argue that irrigation is just as important to get us through the drought of 2024, which some of y'all might not have heard of. But on the screen are the rainfall totals from a gauge in Macon. I just grabbed the one right in the middle of the state, been there 100 years. The blue line is the average for that month, and the orange bars represent what for producer. We were in a drought. I'd argue that we were in a drought in August. I'd argue that we were in a drought in October, right? Irrigation, even in the humid state of Georgia, is really important to bridge those dry times. Even a week at the right time can have a big, big impact on the quantity of a crop and the quality of a crop that a farmer is able to produce. So that's why, and we're going to hear more, some personal testimony in a minute that reinforces the importance of that supplemental water. So how much do we use? That is a chart of agricultural irrigated acreage going all the way back to 1970. It's one that I've been updating for about 15 years or so. I'm going to talk about that dip in 2010 in a minute. That dip is very, very important. All right, but that shows the growth in acreage from the 1970s, really ramped up in the late 70s and early 80s, and then it's kind of plateaued since. We're at about 1.72 million acres of actual wetted ground in the state of Georgia. Right? The colors represent the different crops. It kind of ebbs and flows as crop prices tend to do, right? So if we saw 2025 data, corn's going to go up, cotton's going to go down, right? Those are just snapshots in time, but that gives you an overall picture of how many acres we irrigate. And so to one of the questions, where do we get that water? Well, some of it comes from the ground, and the map on the left is of the principal aquifers in the state of Georgia. Mostly in the coastal plain, that southern part of the state. I want you to pay close attention to the blue aquifer. That's our upper Floridan. That's where about 80% of our groundwater irrigation comes from that aquifer alone. Now, some over in southwest Georgia, my part of the world, we have others, the Claiborne, the Clayton, and the Cretaceous. But most of our groundwater comes from the Floridan aquifer, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. So that's a big part of the water supply for ag, or those aquifers. Also surface water, right? We do in fact have farmers, and we're going to hear from one in a minute, that rely almost exclusively on surface water. That groundwater is not present everywhere in sufficient quantities to provide the amount of supplemental irrigation when we need it most. So those are our rivers in Georgia on the left. Some of our farmers use water directly from the creek, so that picture on the top. Some farmers have impoundments where it's technically a surface water withdrawal, but it's essentially a pond, right? And the example I show is a relatively large one. They're irrigating many hundreds of acres out of that one pond. I think it's worth noting that picture on the top. I use it a lot because I think it's funny. They've got the swing hanging there from the irrigation pipe, right? So it's important. I've used it because, as I say, I think it's hilarious. But it also kind of reminds me that that creek is that farmer's livelihood, but they also appreciate the beauty of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't put a swing down there to go down there and sit and look at it and enjoy it. So remembering that farmers are our original conservationists. They care about that resource just as much as anybody else. So surface water is a big part as well. All right, so groundwater, surface water, the dots on those two maps represent EPD agricultural permit locations. There's between the two maps, there's north of 40,000 dots there. Groundwater on the left representing blue, and I've tried to keep the blue and the green consistent all the way through this presentation. On the left, groundwater permits. On the right, surface water permits. If you just glance at that map, it looks about the same, right? There's about the same number of dots, and it's pretty close, right? But a couple of things do stand out, and I don't know if the pointer, doesn't look like the pointer's going to work, but sort of glance down in southwest Georgia, down there in the lower part of that Flint River Basin area, you see a high concentration of groundwater withdrawals, and then right on the other side of that Flint River Basin line, a lot of surface water withdrawals, right? That Floridan aquifer is very, very productive right there, but you can literally go up a little hill and get on top of what's called the Pelham Escarpment, and it's like a 1,000-foot wedge in the Floridan aquifer. And so that Floridan goes away in a hurry. And so you see kind of a dichotomy there of a lot of groundwater, and then that groundwater goes away and you have a lot of surface water use like here in Colquitt County. So if we look at that, it looks like about the same number of dots, but it's not the same amount of use. That is the amount of agricultural water withdrawals demand from our 2020 work, and we're in the process now of updating for the next round of regional planning. We'll have some 2025/6 data coming out to support regional water planning councils very soon. This is work that I've done, I've led for the last 15 years in close coordination with UGA. About 1.1 billion gallons a day on average, annual average, for groundwater, as compared to about 328 million gallons a day for surface water. And those numbers are reflective of a dry but not extreme drought. So kind of a drought year, right? Those are the numbers we use in planning. We think they're conservative for planning, but we think they're very, very good and very important. So together, about 1.5 billion gallons a day. So just to kind of put that in perspective, we're here in Moultrie. I looked that up. Moultrie withdrawals on average about 3 million gallons a day, like 3.5 in the summer, about 2.5 in the winter, so about 3. That's about 1.1 billion gallons over the entire year. So to, again, conceptualize how much water we're talking about, in a day, on average, ag pumps about what Moultrie pumps in a year. Or Moultrie pumps about what 3,000 acres of ag would pump in a normal year, to sort of help contextualize that. So if we take that data and we look at it in terms of demand, again, on the left in blue is groundwater, on the right in green is surface water, some things really start to stand out, right, in terms of where the demand is. Even when we're looking at groundwater withdrawals, does the lower Flint River Basin kind of stand out to you over on that map on the left? Mitchell County is that darkest county. We pump more water in Mitchell County for ag than any other county in the state by a pretty good bit. Colquitt County's got more pivots, about 1,300 pivots in Colquitt County, only about 1,000 in Mitchell, but Mitchell irrigates almost twice as many acres. Again, that difference right across that line makes a big difference in where we get the water and how we can use it. So pointing out that lower Flint, that's going to come into play in just a second. Then we see that surface water, again, Colquitt on the right, darkest green, and then up just to the west of where I live in Randolph and Calhoun counties. We're going to hear from Wesley in a few minutes about the importance of surface water. So that gives us a snapshot of where we use the most ground and surface. And again, that Floridan is a big component of that groundwater. 80% of the groundwater pumped is Floridan, and about 80% of that is in the lower Flint. It's also important to know that ag does not use water on an average annual basis. We don't pump that much water in February, but we pump an awful lot in July, right? So as we're thinking about planning and management, it's important to know that 1.5 billion gallons is good to know for reference. It's also really helpful to know that it's a little over 4 billion in July. And again, these are all the crops averaged together. This graph can shift right or left a little bit, but it makes sense. You need water during the growing season. And so that number is a lot bigger during a growing season, during a drought. The blue bars, again, that groundwater component, and then the green on top is the surface water component. So I want to spend just a minute and I think some of you have seen this slide before. It's very, very important to know that Georgia really is leading the way nationally when it comes to our understanding of our largest water use, which is agriculture. I have to mention the regional water planning process that got started back with the passage of the water plan in 2008, and then starting the 10 regional water councils in 2009. Having that local buy-in, that local understanding of stakeholders across the range was critically important to where we are now. It's helped us put some things in place that I don't think otherwise we could have done. And also importantly, the funding that supports the Regional Water Planning Council has allowed us to go do a lot of things like map irrigated acreage and get that acreage matched up with meters and build that database of ag water use. And importantly, help us understand the impacts of that, right? And where those impacts are when they occur the most, and how to manage through them and around them to keep our farmers farming. So that regional water planning piece has been critically important, and look forward to that continuing. The middle panel there, the agricultural water meters, I know there's been a lot of good stuff passed in the last 20 years that helps us manage water in Georgia. I don't think there's anything that tops that in terms of agriculture. Having that meter data was critical to some of the litigation that we've endured over the last number of years. It's been critical to helping us build and develop planning and management to address use during droughts. That meter data is critical. It's something we need to make sure we maintain. Taking that meter data, and this is something my team has led, and matching that up with known acres. The reason I know that there are 1.72 million acres and 27,310 center pivots and all of that is because we've gone out and mapped it. Like we know where the water's used, what the source is, how many acres, all that sort of stuff. And by doing those two things, it gives me supreme confidence in the use numbers that I just showed you on the last few slides. And then something that you're going to hear from I'm sure Mr. Perry as well as Mr. Webb, our farmers do a remarkably good job at getting water from a source to their crop for beneficial use. We waste very, very little in terms of the technology we use, the irrigation scheduling things that are at our disposal. We do an awesome job at using the water resources we have and using them wisely. So that's a big deal. And the reason I know that is because we've gone out and touched all these systems, right? That's not an estimate. The reason that dip in that first couple of slides was important, everything prior to 2010 was based on survey data, which was the best we had at the time. From 2010 on, everything is field mapped, verified. Every single year, we're updating that database. We have extremely good information on our acres. That's why that dip matters. So the last thing, just a case study, and I won't spend a lot of time on this. We've talked about that lower Flint being really important, right? It's where primarily the biggest amount of water is used for agriculture. A lot of issues down there, Supreme Court lawsuits. We've had multiple moratoriums put in place. Those red portions of those streams are critical habitat for endangered species. And our farmers have endured a number of sort of fits and starts when it comes to their ability to use water. Going back to my point about regional water planning, all of the work that's gone into understanding use, it's allowed us to put policy in place that gives our farmers certainty. The red zones are now gone, the yellow zones are now gone. Farmers can now access that upper Floridan for additional water use that they haven't been able to do since 2012. And it's also put us in better shape to make sure we keep water in the stream when we most need it through a habitat conservation plan that we're almost, we're this close to finishing and submitting to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I think those two things coupled together help us answer the what's next question. I believe it's the last one, Mr. Chairman, on your list. If in a vacuum, our use would continue to go up. And I think Georgia still remains an awfully good place to grow things that we eat and wear and live in, right? And the kind of work that we've been able to do on the lower Flint gives us certainty in that regard. And so while I certainly anticipate our use to increase, I think we've put safeguards in place such that the impact to the resource doesn't equally increase. Because the one thing I'll say is we're blessed that Florida aquifer, we use it a lot, but we're blessed in that it recharges rapidly. And if we get anything resembling normal rainfall, it's as full as it was the day we tapped it the very first time. So I think Georgia's ag story is really good. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and spend a few minutes to tell it, and I'm happy to answer questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Chairman Werkheiser.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mark. Got a non-ag question in my area. I know that EPD does the final permitting allowance when there's industry that's coming in. And there was a lot of discussion on the Kia plant because their estimate is about 6 million gallons a day. And then we've already got, poultry plants that are doing 2 million. Are y'all involved in that overall process of when we decide to bring a big industry in like that? Because there's a lot of concern, not a lot, there's some activist concern about allowing industry like that withdraws.
Center side of things, one of the ways that we support Georgia EPD is facilitating, providing technical support for all 10 regional water planning councils. And that's where a lot of that information and work is shared. And so as we work through, and we're about to start the 4th iteration of regional water planning, those processes are intended to take into account what we know is being used now, what we might anticipate being used, and forecasting that and coming up with are there any shortfalls either in groundwater or surface water. So while we're not directly involved in the permitting of it or anything like that, we are directly involved in assisting the stakeholders in gathering that information and trying to make the best decisions with it that they can to put in those 10 regional water plans, which then inform Georgia EPD's permitting and management.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Chair Lady Smith.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's amazing the journey this state has made through your leadership and the leadership of others in the room. We did nothing as citizens of Georgia than fight each other over water not too long ago, in addition to our neighbors who took us to court. So your story is phenomenal. I do have one question, maybe for future conservation. It's a controversial topic, so my question goes to how have other states done this, but it's aquifer storage and recovery. And is that something even being looked at, or how deep do we go with this debate?
Right. It's a subject that has been discussed, and there was a pilot project that was done in Southwest Georgia a number of years ago. It's something that is spoken to sort of briefly in the Lower Flint Regional Water Plan, and I believe the Upper Flint as well. It's not something that's been on the radar quite as much since that pilot was done back, that was about 10 years ago, I guess. I think it's something that you keep on the radar, right? I feel like we're in a very good position. Georgia is the leader in understanding their agricultural water use nationwide. And I think as I said, as I concluded, I think we've put in place practices that help us. They certainly take care of us during times of drought with what we have now. It's the making sure we're ready for the unknowns and whether, ASR, aquifer storage and recovery, would need to play a role in supply moving forward. I certainly wouldn't want to discount it out of hand. I would say, at least for the area here where, again, most of our water use is agricultural, we already have an amazing aquifer resource to draw on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, it's always nice when we have people from our university system come speak to us. I believe you're one of the people that don't necessarily have every reason to provide the information that you feel is accurate, so thank you. One of the things I had to ask, and just because the DRI process came up earlier, we're trying to connect the dots of how do we go from a project that may be a larger user, and I apologize, this isn't necessarily an ag question, but it does help through the process. Someone that may be a larger demand user for water on the economic side, and how does that process get over to the water planning side? And the devil is in how do all these groups communicate with one another? Are you involved in the DRI process? And if so, could you kind of give us a brief talk through how that works?
And so I'm not involved in that process. And I think I would circle back to the importance of those regional water planning councils as the place where that discussion can and I think should happen. Those groups were put together and those members were appointed because they hold a stake in a region. They, by virtue of the state water plan, inform EPD's management of those resources. And so I think whether it's input from the DRI process or anything else, going back to the previous question about other large users, I think that's where that discussion needs to take place, at those regional water councils, because they are tasked, as I said, with approving a plan that informs EPD management of the resource and trying to close any shortfalls that might occur.
And that kind of highlights a little bit of what it is I'm trying to get to. Is maybe when I say you, I don't necessarily mean you specifically, but what I'm talking about, how is the intergovernmental communication between the DCA and these regional water authorities? Is that happening? Is there input from the regional water authorities in this DRI process? To me, half the problem is getting everybody to talk. So I'm just trying to get my head around that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd agree with that. And I think getting people to talk is why we have the success story that's on the screen. I know that DCA, GFA, EPD certainly, and others in state government have played big roles in helping councils develop their plan. I'm not aware specifically of a presentation on.
Chairman Dickey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question's really been answered by Chairman Thomas and Workhauser, but I just want to make a statement. I mean, in agriculture, you're doing a great job. Your team is monitoring agricultural water use for the last decade. We've had restrictions on it. We've really done, in my opinion, a great job preserving our agricultural water resources and really a great plan going forward. I think due to some folks in this room in the past. But I think the reason I think this committee's here, the reason I'm here is industrial water use coming in and taking up a lot of our resources, water resources, and leaving agriculture in a worse position. And that's my concern, is who's going to make those decisions, allowing a large industrial such as data center or another car manufacturing facility coming in and leaving agriculture high and dry with short supply of water. And I just, Mr. Chairman, that's what I want this committee to try to find a process. Who gets priority use of water? And so thank you for what you do on the ag side, but we got to do something on the industrial side to know where we're going and what's the future going to look like. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I tell you, Mr. Chairman, this is kind of like a full circle moment in life for me right now. When I was a student at Albany State University, as a matter of fact, the student government president there, I interned with the Water Policy and Planning Center. And we were just then studying the process of metering farmers and the water usage. And I can't say that we did the best job in communicating that rollout, because a lot of people in the agriculture community thought that it was more about restricting or trying to come up with a way to charge and things of that nature, when it was simply about monitoring. So, Mr. Masters, it's great to see the relationship that you have built with many of the people in our agriculture community, to let them know that we were here as friends and not as someone who opposes this industry. So it's great to see this good work that you're doing and helping the state of Georgia, especially based at Albany State University. My question for you is, I guess, more around discharge versus recharge of the aquifer. And I know you said that the Floridian aquifer recharges very fast, right? Do we have a reliable way of monitoring the water level? Like, I can tell you how much gas I have in my Tahoe, and I need to get some before I leave. And leave you some tax money, Mr. Chairman. But do we have a reliable way? Because my concern is we would be in a very terrible position if the state had an uh-oh moment where that aquifer runs dry. And in that hypothetical, in the event we had some severe challenges with the aquifer, what is the surface level water like, the presence of surface level water, where our agriculture community could potentially tap into that in the event we have challenges with the aquifer? What is that like, so we can have expectations?
So thank you for your question, and appreciate your comments about the center. Specific to the Florida, and how do we know the level? How do we measure it? There is an extensive array of real-time groundwater monitoring wells all across South Georgia. Most of those wells are in the Florida and some are in the other aquifers. So we have real-time measurement of the health of that aquifer. Something that we've done for EPD in the last few months, and it's part of the new management in the Lower Flint. You can sign up, and I don't have the QR code here, but you can sign up for daily Florida and aquifer, reports. If we're green, you get them weekly. If we hit to that yellow zone, you get them daily, and if we hit red, that triggers some other management. But we know the level in the Florida, all across that entire Southwest Georgia area. So we've got really good data there. Just as an anecdote about how quick that resource comes back and why it's so unique, 2012, that drought slide that I showed you, we saw the Florida and Southwest Georgia go lower than we'd ever recorded it before, right? That was in July of 2012. We started getting rain mid-September that year. The Floridan was essentially back full by the middle of October, right? So it is very much a sponge. It is very, very unique. That Southwest Georgia area is the recharge zone. It recharges very, very fast. It is, as you pointed out, connected to the surface water. It's why management in South Georgia is so important for stream flows and endangered species. That groundwater pumping is not just impacting the aquifer, it also impacts those streams. So the health of the aquifer is directly impactful to the health of the stream, which is why we manage them together. But in terms of data, we have excellent information about the health of the aquifer and the streams through those stream gauges that I think were there, as well as acres and meters and all the use information. So, and I just want to say, and I know we're short, Water Policy Center, we're about a dozen, a couple more folks. We only exist because of partnerships. We were designed, this is our 25th anniversary, we were built to help do what we're doing this morning, is take a lot of the work from UGA and all these other partners that are doing really outstanding work and package it in such a way that it informs decision makers. So I appreciate your comments, and Mr. Chairman.
Other questions from the committee? Chair Lady Smith.
Thank you again. I just want to do a shout out to the agriculture community. When this issue with sharing water and the droughts and the water wars and all of this was coming about, it was the most difficult move for our farmers who had strong rights within our Constitution as an agricultural state. And they met for years, made the hard decisions. We've got someone here who's going to speak in a minute. But to the people who are listening, these water councils, they're not somewhere up in a cloud that you pull down periodically. They're intended for the public to attend those meetings. The appointments come from the people who live in those regions. So if you, in watching this, feel you've got a need to participate or be a voice, there are 10 regional water councils, and then there's the metropolitan area water council. And together they share information, thank heavens. That didn't happen in the beginning, but this is not an impersonal dialogue we're going through, and it's not just limited to those of us here. If you have these concerns, you've got a voice, and if you're not on the council, you're going to know somebody on that council you can talk to. So I appreciate the efforts of this committee to keep reaching out to everybody, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Good questions from all. We talk about balance in the state, and I agree with Chairman Dickey. Make sure there's balance between industrial and agriculture. Make sure everybody kind of is in part of the discussion. So, all right. Next witness we have, we got a special guest going to talk to us real quick. That'll introduce our next guest. So, before we get there, I want to highlight my fellow high school classmate and Senator Sam Watson has joined us. So, good to have you here, Sam. Appreciate it. Chairman McCall, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, it's been a while since I testified in front of a committee, but I appreciate y'all letting a has-been come back and talk to you. I spent about 26 years in that chamber y'all sit in from January to April. But thank you for letting us come and talk to you. If you don't know, I'm president of Georgia Farm Bureau now, and our whole purpose since 1937 was to represent farmers in the legislative arena, and we do that in Atlanta and Washington, D.C. We're the largest ag organization in the state, and we have about 230,000 member families statewide. And to y'all that count votes, that's about 500,000 votes that we might have a little bit of influence over sometimes. But anyway, thank y'all for letting us come back and talk to you. And since we in this part of the country, I'm going to run through something real quick because I want you to hear from Wesley Webb, who is a farmer and has been irrigating. And I think he's going to show you some updates from where they used to do it to how efficient it is now. But one of the first votes I took in the House in 1995 was a water compact between Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Neither state could change a comma. But the only thing back then, my question was, how much water did we have to let go through Lake Seminole into Florida? That was in 95. Finally, in 2021, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Georgia. But I will tell you some of the stuff that Mark did such a good job explaining that farmers have done in this part of the state especially we wouldn't have got that ruling from the Supreme Court if we hadn't have done all of the stuff that we did back then. We flew all over this part of the state looking at irrigation and the inefficiencies back then of how irrigation was. If your car was dirty back then, all you had to do was ride around till you found an end gun wet in the highway. And you could just pull up on it and get your car washed. You never see that now because of the efficiencies that farmers use. Low pressure, drop nozzles. Wesley's going to talk some about that. But especially the end gun shutoffs or the perception that we are not wasting water when it's squirting out in the highways or over in a bunch of pine trees. Mark talked about the meters. That, I think, and I agree with him, is the most important thing we have done, because back in the day, the way they figured how much water a farmer was using was pump capacity times 24 hours times 7 days. which was way, way more than what the meter showed it was. But like he said, it was viewed by some farmers, or most of them down in this part of the state, as restrictive. So back then, Richard Royal, Bob Hanner, Chairman Smith, and I did a little bit. Back in the day, I handled the meter bill because I live in Elberton, Georgia, which is probably 300 miles from here, and I didn't have to deal with these farmers that were going to be mad because they were having to put meters on their systems. Now, I think they realize it's the best thing that they have as a management tool and being able to keep up with what they're using. I have my old mind doesn't work. I have a timeline of all the water stuff we did, starting in 1988 up until 21, and I'd be happy to share it with you if any of y'all want to look at it. But just reading it, Lynn, it goes through a lot of stuff that you and I did that I had forgot about, to be honest with you. But there's one thing I want to stress to you. Whatever y'all do, keep us with Eastern water law. We don't want water law like what's west of the Mississippi. You know, they say out there, liquor's for drinking and water for fighting over. And that's pretty much the way it is when you get west of the Mississippi. Right, right, and you own it out there. But be sure to do that. There's one thing that Mark and them made, and y'all may or may not want a copy, and I've used this 100,000 times. It's a water drop, and I don't have all this fancy stuff, but if you can see how big this drop is, Georgia gets about 50 trillion gallons of water a year. You see that little bitty white dot? That is the total water use, surface and groundwater in Georgia. So that gives you a comparative of how much we get to how much we actually use. So I've used this thousands of times talking. But we're making advances every day. I know Stripling does all kind of research with irrigation efficiency, still doing it, and I'm not going to get into all of that. But I do want to brag a little bit on your current EPD. Director Cowan, Anya Trzynski, and Margie Grockmore are doing an excellent job in this part of the state to try to help farmers be able to irrigate more, to wet more ground. And basically one of these days, and it's probably now, this is going to be the breadbasket of the United States. When you look at our water, and you look at our land, and you look at our climate, and you look at what y'all are not doing like California is as far as regulations on ag goes, this part of the country is going to be the breadbasket and feed the world and feed Georgia. So this is what I want y'all to keep in mind when you are talking about future water policy and how important it is not just to the farmers down here, but to the whole world to be able to eat, wear clothes, and live in a house made out of 2x4s. That is agriculture, and that's what we have got to keep in mind. Now, our people, I hope you know, Adam, Chase, and Alex, they are at the Capitol every day. We are at your disposal for anything you have, any kind of questions with ag. But what makes Farm Bureau unique is we are made up of grassroots members, grassroots farmers, like my buddy Wesley Webb, who is going to come and talk to you. He is a president in Calhoun County. They grow corn, cotton, peanuts, blueberries, and timber. Is that right, Wesley? Y'all wanted a farmer to come and talk to you. He is one that keeps his hind end in a tractor seat of one of those $1 million cotton pickers that they use every day. So Wesley, he's a whole lot more knowledgeable than I am. I'm just an old guy that was lucky enough to do what I do. So Wesley Webb, will you please come and talk to us? I tell everybody, he is my long-haired redneck buddy. from Calhoun County. But he is a fantastic guy, and if y'all got any hard questions, he can handle it. Thank you. Thank you, bud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
How do you live up to that? How do you follow that? I did bring my iPad. For y'all young folks, this is an old iPad. It's a yellow piece of paper. And before I forget to address your question, there are 4 USGS test wells on my farm that were put in the mid-'80s to monitor the aquifers. So that is something that is done. My name is Wesley Webb. I am a 5th-generation farmer. I am in Calhoun County, about 62 miles west-northwest, 40 miles west of Albany, 60, 70 miles south of Columbus. Fortunately, I'm far enough from Alabama that I don't have to deal with that. Now, I am the youngest of 3 brothers. That means I've never been right in my life. Never had an original thought. But they wanted a farmer to come talk, and he wasn't available, so y'all are stuck with me. Irregardless of what Mr. Tom said, thank you, Mr. President, for that embellished introduction. We farm in Calhoun County. I am in the Flint River Soil and Water Conservation District. It encompasses 9 counties. We rely heavily on USDA, FSA, NRCS, Farm Service Agency, National Resources Conservation Service. They have helped us over the years. Mr. Perry, you will hear from him soon at the research part. We have seen innovation just in my 30 years. I've been doing this 35 years. I've been putting my own money out for 30 years. We've seen a lot of innovation over the years, and I will show you some pictures in just a minute. I was not prepared because, where's Adam? I was the second choice. I was not the first choice. The first choice was busy. I just want to pick on Adam. But I like paper. That's obvious. I'm going to bring y'all some paper in just a minute and let y'all see. I like paper. I'm old school. Water is a #1 resource to us. Water is very important. You can't have water, you can't have coffee, you can't have tea, you can't have anything. In my personal opinion, a safe, dependable, affordable food supply is a matter of national security. If you don't believe that, you talk to me after this meeting. You can come back here in the back row and talk to Tim Alexander. We were talking before this meeting about the 3 hurricanes that have affected us in southwest Georgia and northwest Florida. You've seen it on the news. You've seen natural disasters. You have seen people at the grocery store standing in line looking for water, looking for food. You've seen the cameras go in. There is no food. There is no water. I'm not going to say we're the most important people, but we are very important. We provide food. We provide shelter. In the timber, as Mr. Tom said, we provide clothing. My socks, my undershorts, my pants, they're cotton. Cotton is a natural fiber. I grow cotton, so I'm going to promote it. Everything on my farm is irrigated. My brother and I farm together. Like I said, I have 3. My oldest brother was a truck driver, didn't care anything about the farm. My brother and I look after 4,000 acres, 41 irrigation systems. Sometimes we're a little behind to adapt technology. Sometimes we're a little bit ahead. And I didn't realize it. My mama told me it's going to get faster as you get older. I didn't realize it'd been 20 years until Mark said it. We volunteered for the programs to put the flow meters on our pumps and on our irrigation systems. And if you couldn't see the dial, it's very similar to what you have in your car. It's a speedometer. At the very bottom, it's an odometer. When that pump is running, it comes up and tells you how many gallons per minute you're pumping. That odometer tells you how many gallons you have pumped over the lifetime of that system. My brother and I look after 41 irrigation systems. It is a full-time job. Now, technology has helped, and I will show, and I'm going to ask my good friend who came this morning, and he said he would come and he would help me. His name is Jeff Nunnery, and he is with Georgia Farm Bureau. And I'm going to ask Jeff if he can bring you ladies and gentlemen some pictures. The first picture in that stack looks very much like a suspension bridge. This is an old hydromatic system, a large A-frame system. Pipeline ran in the middle of the system. There was no electricity, no generator, no diesel motor in the middle of the field of that irrigation system. When you crank the pump up at the pond, the water actually moved the irrigation system. That system was put in on my farm in 1972. My grandfather, great-grandfather, my father, my uncle, they all had the foresight to see what was coming. There were 2 ponds on the farm at the time. Now there's 4. 2 ponds, natural ponds, 2 dug ponds, and they are what is known as watershed ponds. And what that means is when it rains, when the Lord sends rains, the ponds fill up. I don't have a spring, I don't have a well. As Mark was showing you, right through Calhoun County where I am, you can drill all the wells you want. You'll get enough to run a house. That's it. When one dry streak where I farm. Now, Notchaway Creek, which was on Mark's map, is the western border of my farm. We do have permits to pump out of Notchaway Creek. We have a pump down there, and we pump water 1 mile from that creek back to our holding ponds. When the ponds, we start running the ponds down in a dry year, we go crank that pump up. And like I said, sometimes we're a little behind, sometimes we're a little ahead. Years ago, we decided it cost too much and it was too big a mess to have a diesel motor at the creek, have a diesel motor at the pond. You had to haul fuel. And think about it like changing the oil in your car. You change the oil in your car every 3,000 miles. You're supposed to. Every 200 hours, you need to change oil in that diesel engine because when it's dry, it's running 24 hours a day. You couldn't take that diesel engine right up here to Lassiter Chevrolet, where my son-in-law is. You couldn't take it to Jiffy Lube. You had to go to it. You had to have a bucket to catch the oil. You had to have a bucket for the oil filter. You had to have oil to replace it. You know what? This is a lot of work. Electricity is cheaper. It cost us $12,000 in 2001 to extend the power line down to the creek. We did away with the diesel motor. Little did we know at the time that it would become a term we were reducing our carbon footprint. We were just making it easier on ourselves. We had no idea. I don't know when it was, and there's some folks from NRCS in the room that have helped us tremendously over the years. But there was a government program that came along that said, hey, we want to talk to you farmers. This is what we need to do. We're going to go to a diesel to electric conversion, and we will cost share with you. What we want you to do is remove those diesel motors, put electricity in there. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. You take that diesel motor out, we will cost share. I don't remember the percentage, but they would help us in a grant, a government grant. We took the diesel motors out. We're now all electric. Everything on the farm is electric. Well, Wesley, what about, if the electricity cuts off, if the power cuts off? Well, that irrigation in the field's running on electricity. If the power cuts off, there's no need for that diesel motor to keep running, right? That was some of the first things we did. The last dry land on my farm was planted to timber in 2001. We were all irrigated, and some of it was a financial decision. Some of it had to do with crop insurance, and crop insurance is a safety net. It can be good. It is no different than your car insurance, your homeowner's insurance. Anybody in here ever come out on the good side of an insurance claim? Okay, I take that as a no. It is true, though. It is a little bit of a safety net. But the crop insurance is there to keep me from completely going broke. The problem with being a dry land and an irrigated farmer is you have to separate everything. And it's a whole lot easier for my tiny little brain to keep everything in one nice, neat package. I can have 2 different farms, 2 different farm serial numbers, and if I have a dry year, 98 was a dry year, 2005 was a dry year, we're not even going to discuss 2011. 2011 was horrible. but my irrigated yield is going to keep me above the threshold that's going to kick in a payment. I've got 1,000 acres of irrigated land. I've got 200 acres of dry land. That dry land can burn up. My irrigated average is going to keep me from getting a payment. Why would I continue to waste my money? I planted pine trees. I love a pine tree. You plant him, you make sure he gets up and growing 2 or 3 years, you forget about it until the Lord sends Hurricane Michael in 2018, and you start over. But 20 years later, 25 years later, you're thinning pine trees and you've got money. You never have to fool with a pine tree. I do love a pine tree. Some of the things we've done, like I said, was the diesel to electric conversion. And the pictures that you saw that Jeff passed out, the first ones were high pressure, high volume systems. High pressure, high impact, right? High impact, okay, thank you. I told y'all I ain't good at this, y'all bear with me. The second thing we did, the second picture you saw was the sunset, and I like that picture. That's the only reason that one's in that group. The third picture you saw, the industry had redesigned. We didn't need those 20-foot towers. They redesigned, they put the pipeline at the top of the A-frame, they spread the base out. That's what was standard in the late 70s and early 80s. And the third picture in that, third or fourth picture in that group, you saw the pipeline, and what you saw appeared to be a mist coming off the top of the irrigation. That's medium pressure, okay? We're getting better. We didn't realize it at the time, but using the high pressure, high impact sprinklers, little bitty fine drops just shooting water everywhere. Well, it was great. We had water. We did not have to wait for the Lord to send us rain. We didn't have to work on that. We could plant the crop. We could water it. We made sure every seed could germinate. You want a good stand when you start. I consider a good stand, I want 90% of those seeds to come up. No different than you planting your garden, you planting some tomatoes, you planting cucumbers and squash. You don't go out there and water them, and the Lord doesn't water them, it's not any good. Well, we didn't realize it at the time, and it was studies by people like Mark and Calvin, who you're going to hear from soon. You're putting out an inch of water across that field with that high pressure system where you're losing 3 to 4 tenths through evaporation. You didn't realize that. Well, they started doing studies and figured out, y'all are wasting water. So we go to medium pressure, okay? There's got to be something better. Valley irrigation, Zematic irrigation, Rinke irrigation, they're working the entire time. Nelson, the company that makes the rotators, the sprinklers that we use now. Those are the last 2 pictures in that stack that you see. There are now hoses that come off the top of that pipeline. They are approximately 2 feet above the crop, peanuts and cotton. Now, planting corn, obviously corn 7 feet tall, they are in the corn, and the first thing I said, those drops are in the middle of that corn. It's not being very efficient. How can it be efficient when you've got a rotator and you've got corn stalks all the way around it and it's blocking the water? And once again, I was wrong. But what it has done is it has allowed me to use less water, to be more on target with my water, and just really save what we're trying to do. We use programs, and Jeff, I'm gonna make you get up one more time if you don't mind. We use programs and we use remote sensors. That's all the same thing. I apologize for that, but now I told y'all I like paper. I always have a paper trail. We use remote sensors in the field, and those sensors you can see, they will tell me the first column you see is DAP, that's days after planting. You will see a minimum and a maximum soil temperature. You will see how much did it rain, do I need to irrigate, a forecast irrigation date. Rather than going out every morning like we used to do, or every afternoon and looking, it looks like it's wilted. Those peanuts look like they need water. That cotton looks like it needs water. Well, it's been 2 days since I watered. I might as well go water it. That right there is saving me money. That's saving money. That's saving the groundwater. Everything I use is surface water because, like I said, you go through my area, all you're going to get if you drill a well is enough for a house. We've got 270 acres worth of pond now at an average of 8 feet deep. That gives me 1,080 acre feet. You want that broken down any further? I suggest you talk to these people that are a whole lot smarter than me. That's about all I can tell you. The other things we have done are variable rate irrigation. Now, I'm going to let Mr. Calvin have it right here, and he's going to tell you the same thing. 100 years ago, my brother decided he was going to try it because he's got a holding pond in the middle of the field right next to the irrigation pivot point. We pump from the main pond behind my house to this holding pond, and that holding pond feeds that irrigation. Well, when that irrigation is going around, those first 2 towers, they don't need to be on while it's going over that little pond, right? That's wasting water. Well, they come up with a variable rate irrigation. You can cut irrigation off, you can cut towers off, you can cut individual drops off in certain spots where you don't need it. The first few times that it went over the pond, it cut off the first 2 towers of the irrigation. You could sit at our shop and watch. When it cut those 2 towers off, you could see the gaskets blowing down the line on the rest of the towers. And I'll be kind, we cussed my brother, and we cussed Hobbs and Holder, right? Mr. Perry, it was Hobbs and Holder. Mr. Perry, now he was just, this wasn't him. He perfected it. It finally got perfected, and somebody had the bright idea, when you cut irrigation off, it's putting more pressure back here at the pump. We might need a pressure relief valve. Enter Mr. Calvin Perry, somebody who came and fixed it. The next thing is remote soil moisture monitoring, part of what you see. There are several different programs, several different companies that put it out in the industry, and if they were paying me, I'd tell you who they were. But they're not paying me, so I'm not going to tell you who they are. But I will tell you this. I stayed away from these things for a long time because I was convinced that smartphones make people dumb. I'm right about some of them. But we have sensors in the field. They are 4 inches, 8 inches, and 12 inches deep. It tells me how much moisture is in the field, 4, 12, and 8 inches, 4, 8, and 12. It also has this fancy little thing. Anybody remember kindergarten? Am I the only one who remembers kindergarten in the seesaw? It has a rain gauge on it. It has a thimble on each side of the pendulum. When 2 tenths get in it, it flips. That bucket empties out. When 2 tenths get this one, just back and forth. I can sit at my house, hear the thunderstorm, look at the radar, and tell it's raining in circle 6. I can pull up that app, and I can see that it has rained 6 tenths where that sensor is. Then I can close that app. I can open my Valley Irrigation, my AgSense app. I can cut that irrigation off from the house. I'm saving water the whole time. Now, as Mr. Tom said, these big sprinklers, the end guns, for the longest time, you had to stand at the pivot point of the irrigation and look. It's going to start hitting my pine trees right there in that corner. It's going to come out of the pine trees and back into the field in this corner. There were ramps up there with micro switches that I could cut that end gun off, but it was a guess. Now, with Valley's AgSense program and the computer panels, I can go right over there where I want it to cut off, open that app, drop a pin. I can go over here where I want it to cut back on, open my app, drop a pin, hit a button, and send it to the irrigation system. And that irrigation system cuts that big sprinkler off there, cuts it back on there, saving water the entire time. Anything I can save me is better for me. It's better for all of us. Like I said, I believe what we do is we support, like Mr. Tom said, we feed the world. The American farmer has fed the world for a long time. Now, rather, other countries are catching up, and we want them to catch up. We can't feed everybody. We want to, I want to, but we need innovation. We need technology. We need all the help we can get. Anything we can do that will save money, just like you in your business, whether you're a carpenter, you're a plumber, you're an attorney, you're an accountant, whatever you can do to save money is going to help you in your bottom line. Because there's somebody coming behind you. And if it's not your son or your daughter who you're aggravated with, it's that sweet little granddaughter that's got you wrapped around her finger. And anything you can do to save the world for her, I could go to my grave happy knowing that I'm 5th generation and it's going to be going on 5 more generations. Now, lastly, I will say, you ask 10 different, where's Tom? You ask 10 different long-haired redneck farmers what they think about the EPD and you're going to get 10 different answers. You ask people what they think about the police, you're going to get 10 different answers. You know what? If you get out front and you be proactive instead of reactive, I think you do a lot better. Like I said, I didn't remember it until Mark said it had been 20 years. EPDs came out and said, look, y'all have the meters. We want to make sure you got your permits in order. Not a problem. 2001, I bought the last little bit of farmland from my mother. She was, in 2001, Mama was 68 years old. Her father died at 58, my grandfather, Mr. Harvey Jordan. That's my farm name. And her mother died at 71, and my mother was being prepared, estate prepared. See, my father died when he was 48, I was 14 years old. My mother is the strongest woman you would ever meet in your life because she was left with 3 teenage boys. And I'm the nicest one of the bunch, y'all just don't know. I called my friend Chris Ward over in Tifton. Hey, I need to change the permit. He said, what you got? I gave him the permit number. I gave him the GPS coordinates they had given me. Within 3 days, I had the new permit on the phone with him. 2 weeks later, I had it in my hand. If you'll stay out in front, if you will stay and do what you're supposed to do, they protect us as farmers. In turn, they protect the folks in the city. I was actually in, personal comment, I was in.
Got about 2 more minutes. We got to wrap it up.
Yes, sir. I was in Publix in Albany. This is my last comment. About 3 years ago, I'm in Publix in Albany, Georgia, and I heard a woman in the next aisle say, I'm not worried about the farmers. I get my food here. And I have to let go of I'm in the South, so it's a buggy. I let go of the buggy, and I turned, and my wife grabbed me and said, no, because I was going to tell that lady what I thought. Where do they think food comes from? Like I said, it is a matter of national security. That's my opinion. If you've ever been through a disaster, if you've ever seen it on television, if you've ever seen the people that we so callously call third world countries waiting for humanitarian aid, it is very important to me. It is very important to us, to my area, and I think it's very important to the rest of the country and the world. Now, I stand up here and ramble all day, but you cut me off, and I appreciate your time. Didn't touch on half of what I wanted to, but I will go down a rabbit hole, and my wife will get on. I promise you, my wife will get on to me when we leave. But if there are any questions, yes, sir.
Thank you, Wesley. Any questions from the committee? I think we're all enthralled. That was good, really good information, Mr. Wesley, and we appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you. Next person up will be Mr. Bert Early from the Forestry Commission. We are running a little bit behind, so if you can
speed it up, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I will go as fast as I can. I have a fairly short presentation anyway, but I'm Bert Early. I'm with the Georgia Forestry Commission. I work with our water quality program. So I just want to talk to you real quick about our forest and the benefits that they provide in regards to protecting water quality. So let's start out with our Georgia's land use. Georgia is about 2/3 forest land, okay? About 33% is non-forest land, and 2/3, 66, 67% is forest land. So what that means is when it rains, 2 out of every 3 raindrops falls in forest land. So forest land plays a big role in protecting our water resources and water quality. We know what we get from our forest, the typical forest products, wood, paper, but forest also provides soil conservation, wildlife habitat, recreation, clean air, and what we're here to talk about today, clean water. How do our forests help provide clean water? How do they improve our water quality? There are a number of ways. They filter pollutants. Forest soils and vegetation help absorb pollutants such as nitrates and pesticides from the runoff before it reaches our waterways. They prevent erosion. The vegetation, the tree roots hold soil in place. The litter and forest debris on the ground help trap sediment before it reaches our rivers and streams. And that reduces the sediment, preventing the soil or sedimentation from entering our water, leaving us with cleaner water that helps prevent the need for filtering and water treatment facilities. So those are some ways. They also help provide shade to keep the water temperatures down, to help keep the temperatures at a suitable level for aquatic life and help maintain adequate dissolved oxygen levels. This is what we deal with mostly is with our water quality program with forestry, water quality obviously, but they do play a part in improving water quantity, which is what we talk about a lot at these meetings. The water quantity part, the forest helps slows the water, the canopy slows rainfall, reducing surface runoff and allowing the forest soils to absorb more water and hold more water. That increases infiltration. Forest soils absorb and hold water, allowing it to soak into the ground and help replenish our groundwater supplies. They also help regulate flow. The trees themselves have storage capacity. The forest soils act as a natural sponge, holding water during wet periods and releasing it more slowly, helping mediate floods and drought periods. Some of the economic and community benefits I'm sure we're all aware of, reduced treatment costs, as I mentioned earlier, reduce the cost for treating water with some of our treatment facilities. Additional benefits of clean air, recreational opportunities, as well as they support healthy ecosystems. Clean water and healthy forests provide healthy habitat for all plants and animals, aquatic and non-aquatic animals. So, what is our role in that as the Georgia Forestry Commission? The Environmental Protection Division, or Georgia EPD, designated the Georgia Forestry Commission as the lead agency to coordinate the state's forest water quality program. So in doing that, we have three main responsibilities I'm going to talk to you about. First one is we helped establish and we revise as needed Georgia's best management practices for forestry. That's our BMP manual is what we call it. That's the 2019 version. We revise it roughly about every 10 years. So in simple terms, BMPs are common sense measures, methods, and practices used to prevent or reduce non-point source pollution. Okay, this is what we use. These are our guidelines for protecting water quality during all forestry operations. Another responsibility we have is to investigate and mediate any water quality complaints dealing with forestry operations. If there's something that's noticed and recognized as potentially being or having a negative impact on water quality and it's a result of a forestry operation, we'll go out and investigate, talk to all the parties involved, mediate the situation, make sure it gets corrected, and reduce the potential for negative impacts to water quality. One of our big responsibilities, the last one I'll talk about, is our BMP monitoring. We have two main ways we monitor BMP implementation. First way is we have a simple one-page form that we use for just brief inspections to get a general idea of BMP implementation. We use that for when we investigate complaints. We use a BMP assurance exam. We do an assurance exam on all timber harvests that occur on state property. And we can do them upon request as well. But the main way we monitor our BMP implementation is through our statewide forestry BMP survey. We look at all aspects of forestry operations, timber harvesting, tree planting, site preparation, prescribed fire breaks, everything that has to do with ongoing forestry is something that BMPs apply to, and that's what we're looking at and inspecting during our survey. We also recognize what we call a water quality risk, which is when water pollution is occurring or imminently will occur due to a soil disturbance caused by forestry activity. And that's one of our main goals with our water quality program in general, is to minimize and reduce these water quality risks when they occur. So our survey is based on a protocol that was developed by the Southern Group of State Foresters. One reason for that is so that the other states, all of the southeastern states, do a similar survey, and we can take that information, that data collected, and compare it with other states and be looking at this, basically the same format. Our survey is one of the more detailed and comprehensive surveys within the group. We have 136 yes or no questions. Basically, the questions are the individual BMPs, where we ask, is this BMP, applicable BMP, is it implemented properly, or is it not implemented properly or not implemented at all? And we answer those questions for all the BMPs that are applicable to a particular site, and use that to come up with an overall BMP implementation score. With that, we can break it down into 3 different levels: the individual BMPs, the BMP implementation per category, categories being things like forest roads, stream crossings, streamside management zones, timber harvesting or tree planting. And then, of course, we put it all together to get an overall site implementation score for that particular site. Once we've completed all the sites statewide, we combine all that information to get a overall statewide BMP implementation rating. We started in 1991 with our BMP surveys. Here's a graph showing how we've progressed through the years. That barely works. 1991, we conducted our first survey, and the overall statewide BMP implementation score was 64%. So we use this data to also use it to determine where we're going to focus our educational efforts. So in 1991, we had a lot of areas we could focus our educational efforts on. But since then, you can see there's been a good upward trend, and since the 2004 survey, we have scored 90% or better with our overall statewide BMP implementation since the 2004 survey. So we have almost 2 decades worth of 90% or better BMP implementation in forestry, in the forestry community in Georgia. We also recognize the water quality risk I mentioned earlier. So you can see here we started that in 1998. In 1998, we identified 448 water quality risks statewide. So here we also have a good positive downward trend with the number of water quality risks identified for the different survey periods. So we look at that as a positive as well. Just a good overall trend of reducing the amount of water quality risk that we were seeing with our survey. This is a map from the 2023 survey showing where the sites were located. We picked the sites at random, and we only look at ongoing forestry, meaning it's a site that's been harvested, but is going to be returned back to forestry by artificial or natural regeneration. So it's not going to be converted to a non-forestry use such as development or a shopping mall or whatever. So just a quick comparison, we are currently in the middle of our 2025 BMP survey. So in 2023, we did a total of 266 sites, looked at about 56,000 acres, and had an overall statewide implementation score of 96.81%, which was the highest score that we've had since we've been conducting the survey. Currently in 2025, we've completed 233 sites with a goal of 250 sites. We've looked at a little over 32,000 acres, and we currently have a score of 96.64%. So we're right in line with that high score from 2023. So it looks like we're headed in the right direction. Close out with this, kind of where we are today based on this information and what we've done with our survey and our educational efforts. BMPs have become well established. They've been around for over 40 years. Our relationship with other government agencies, forest industry folks, groups like this have made our BMPs become widely understood by all stakeholders within the forestry community. And they've also become widely accepted as they become more understood. But most importantly, they have been proven successful. There's been a number of studies and research done showing that if our BMPs are implemented properly, they are effective in reducing the amount of pollution, or in this case, sedimentation that occurs within our state's water. So there's a lot of information out there that proves that when they're implemented correctly, they are a benefit to protecting our water resources. And that is it in a nutshell. Was that quick enough?
That was
happy
good.
to take questions.
Very good. Thank you, Bert. Any questions from the committee for Forestry Commission? It's good to see things are driven by data.
Yep.
And folks are implementing the data and you're tracking it. That's what we're asking folks to do, is track it so we can interpret it and use it to drive decision-making and policy-making at the state level. So thank y'all for that. Final witness today will be Mr. Calvin Perry. As Calvin makes his way to the stage, he's retired from, I believe, UGA, and was out at Striplin's Irrigation Research Center for a good amount of time, and very smart on the use of irrigation. So, Mr. Calvin, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for being here to discuss this important topic that, like Mark Masters, you heard earlier, devoted much of my career working on. And I am a lifelong resident of this county, and proud to say that. But some of you may like or not like. I'm a double dog, got my BS and MS from Georgia in Ag Engineering, and went to work for UGA shortly after, and that's been my career, 33-year career, and did serve as superintendent of the Striplin Irrigation Research Park west of Camilla since 2008, and we did a lot of good work there. It continues today with the new team that are in place there now. But I've worked with irrigation for about 25 years and was part of the team that it was mentioned earlier, working in variable rate irrigation. We were proud to develop that as a marketable system at UGA. It had been developed elsewhere but wasn't really market ready. I do serve on the Lower Flint Ocklawaha Regional Water Council. That water councils have been mentioned earlier. But if you're in Moultrie, I'm just Miss Perry's husband. My wife taught here for about 35 years in kindergarten mostly, so I work out of the county. So when I'm into the county, most people just see me as Miss Perry's husband, which I'm proud to say. It's a good thing. We talked about this already, so I won't repeat some of this. Rainfall patterns are changing. I think Mark mentioned how we see drought periods occurring in the middle of a year that have ample rainfall. I believe it was the state meteorologist for Florida that says we're seeing wetter wets and drier dries. And Mark showed that very well on a graph earlier, where there were periods we need irrigation around months where we're getting ample rainfall. We know all our plants, especially our crops, require water to grow successfully. But with our sandy soils, we're likely going to have periods each year we're going to have to irrigate to get through those dry periods, so that Wesley, the long-haired redneck, I like that, can continue having an economically sustainable yield to get him from year to year. Because he's made a major investment when that furrow is closed, when that seed's in the ground, and he needs to make sure he protects that investment. And Mark mentioned there's a lot of irrigation systems in Georgia. I've worked primarily with overhead center pivot systems like you saw in Wesley's photos that went around. We also have a tremendous amount of drip irrigation that the senator uses. A lot of eastern Colquitt County is covered in drip irrigation. We do have well over 1,200 pivots here in this county, watering a lot of acres. But why does Wesley irrigate? I think he really touched on it. The obvious is we want yield when there's dry years or when there's poorly timed rainfall. We touched on that. Farmers would like economically sustainable yield levels year to year, not just 1 out of 3. We need to get the crop up and growing, like Wesley said, to get it germinated, to get it emerged, to get it off to a good start, activate pesticides, make good use of that expensive fertilizer that Wesley puts out there, safeguards that investment. When that furrow is closed, he's put a tremendous amount just at that moment, and he wants to manage that risk. And in Georgia, water is essentially free for agriculture, but it is expensive to move, to pump. The University of Georgia Extension Service estimates statewide that to pump an acre inch, that will be 1 inch of water, imagine 1 inch over an acre of land, is about $9 if you're using electricity, which is by far the most common power source now. So if Wesley's, I didn't do his total farm, but let's say he's doing 1,000 acres, and it's a dry year, and he has to apply up to 10 inches over that area, he's going to pay $90,000 to his local EMC or Georgia Power, probably EMC, to pump that water. So that's why at Albany State, University of Georgia, USDA, et cetera, EPD, that's why so much work is going on in the past and in the future to help our irrigators be as efficient and smart with their irrigation as possible. So just going to touch on a few things that I've seen and worked on where they are increasing efficiency and becoming sold on to this smart irrigation idea. It's kind of a catchphrase, and he's touched on some of those. There's a lot of hardware improvements. He showed you some of those, and a lot of technological developments that have also been touched on a little bit. We have manufacturers now that have produced really improved sprinklers or nozzles that deliver the water to the crop very efficiently. As Wesley said, if I lose water to wind drift to my farmer's field next door, or I'm sending it back to the atmosphere, I have to pump more water to get it to the plants. Well, if I can use a more efficient sprinkler that is getting more of that water I pump to the soil, to the plant, I don't have to pump as much to get the same net effect. So he showed you something like this. Old systems used impact sprinklers. You might have seen them on golf courses, on lawns, on sports fields with the ratcheting sprinkler. Very inefficient. You lose a lot of the water to the atmosphere that you pump. Compare that to more modern low-pressure spray-type sprinklers that are often on the drop hoses, like Wesley mentioned. Very efficient, use lower pressure, so there's less energy that has to be generated by the pumping system. And those larger droplets get down to the soil much quicker, and Wesley doesn't have to pump as much to get the same net effect. And Mark, I believe you found that in the lower Flint, about 93% of the wetted acres are being wet by these type sprinklers. So I think the whole ag water group can take a lot of solace from that, saying that farmers have adopted this. The manufacturers see that farmers want this, and the need is there, and most systems now sold have these on them. So that's a great success story. In terms of technological things, I'm an engineer. I love gadgets. I've always carried a smartphone, Wesley. I'm sorry. But remote monitoring and control, he did a good overview of that. He can control his systems from anywhere in the world, literally. Some of you may know Casey Cox over in Mitchell County, just a great young lady that's taking over the family farm. She got involved in this, and her dad needed the center pivot moved. He used a flip phone. He couldn't move the system because he was away from the pivot. She could move that system for him, but you can do much more than move. You can monitor, you can control, as he mentioned, set the end gun parameters. And these are offered by all the major irrigation manufacturers, as well as a number of third-party vendors. Great technology. I'd say most irrigators today either have these or certainly are looking at implementing this technology. Advanced irrigation scheduling tools. So instead of Sam with all his high-end, high-profit or not vegetables in the field, does he need to guess or estimate how much he needs to irrigate? Farmers need more advanced methods. They need to know exactly when they need to irrigate. So we now have smartphone apps, we have soil moisture sensor systems, and we have hybrid systems that deploy combinations of those that are tested, they're proven. Some of them, like these, have been developed either at USDA with Irrigator Pro, or the smart irrigation apps, or the new SI CropFit app have been perfected at the University of Georgia. The cotton, soybean, and corn and peanut parts developed at UGA. Citrus and other vegetables developed down at Florida, Boo Hiss. Very good apps and are free. It's even an added benefit. But these require hyper-local, accurate weather data to be functional. So there is some cost. If you're not near one of the University of Georgia statewide weather network sites, you need at least a basic weather station. So panel, if you're thinking about where some funding can be invested among farmers, I think weather stations is a great potential investment to be looking at. Other technologies, soil moisture sensors, a more accurate method of scheduling irrigation, because you're putting that sensor directly in that soil where that crop is growing. There are many types, just some photos here of some various types that are available. However, most farmers tell us that the data requires skilled interpretation, and often they don't feel comfortable doing that. So a lot of consultants are getting into offering that as a service. So that's a good way to fill that need for data interpretation. And then hybrid systems. This is combining a soil moisture and its data with smart plant physiological data that we proudly work on at the university and USDA so that better irrigation recommendations can be made. These are available now from several of our irrigation hardware manufacturers as well as some other vendors. And the free USDA Irrigator Pro system that was developed in Dawson, Georgia with the USDA Peanut Lab, it has that option also to make it even more accurate as an irrigation scheduling tool. And then they kindly mentioned our work in variable rate irrigation systems. The Webb brothers like to tease me over the years that I did cause some headaches from them early on, but they were great adopters of a lot of this. And his brother Jimmy, I like to point out, he was on the bleeding edge of some of this technology, and we did cause a few headaches, and they were gracious enough to work with us to get it to the next level. But VRI, or variable rate irrigation, is just putting the right amount of water in the right spot in the right field at the right time, either by you knowing that field very well, or perhaps you have sensors or other methods of knowing what those subfield zones need. And just very briefly, this is a field, I believe, in Calhoun County. On the bottom right, you see just an aerial image, and then that same image up above, and that red area marks where there's no irrigation needed. That's non-cropped area. So our friends with NRCS adopted VRI as a water conservation tool and cost shared this. And I believe it's still cost shared today as a way to help farmers conserve this resource. It cycles sprinklers on and off, either turning them off all the time, that sprinklers over that area, and eliminating water over non-cropped areas, or we can cycle them on and off to put out differing amounts of water to tailor the water to those cropped areas so they get the proper and most beneficial amount of water on those areas. So in this example, in this field, it's a 228 acre field, about 84 acres are non-crop. So why water those acres? It's probably a maintenance issue for that farmer. So he's having to maintain what's growing in those areas. Why don't we turn off sprinklers in that area? So lastly, just some take-home info that I gleaned from my colleagues, primarily Dr. Wesley Porter and Dr. George Valitas, great colleagues over the years from over the Tipton campus. It is expensive to irrigate. We've talked about the per acre, $9 per acre inch. But there are methods to help growers be more efficient. There are scheduling tools. Dr. Porter noted sensors are expensive. But guess what? Not as expensive as yield or profit loss if you misapply your irrigation. Cotton and peanut, there are definite yield penalties if you over or under apply irrigation water. Corn, we tend to think of, Wesley, you can't irrigate it too much. But there is a plateau where you're irrigating over the point that plant can really use it, so you're just losing profit because you're pumping for no reason. And often our research, certainly at the Stripping Irrigation Park and elsewhere, leads us to know that most consistent yields and water use efficiency, there's that water efficiency again, which I like to say more crop per drop. It kind of makes the point. We're getting more crop out of the drops that we irrigate, can lead to maximum profitability. So, apologies, hospital calling about my mother's medicine, I'm sure. A lot of these tools now are being implemented by our farmers. A lot of them are being looked at by our farmers because some are expensive. Variable rate irrigation, while I love the technology, it's been great as a career, I recognize it's pretty expensive to put on a center pivot, but it has so many benefits. But they are adopting, and you've heard here today how it's benefiting him in his work environment and his production of fiber and feed. So with that, I'll stop. I hopefully got us close to back being on schedule and answer any questions.
Chairman Werkheiser.
A, how much is a weather system you talked about? And B, since in rural Georgia we've got an airport every 10 to 12 miles, point to point, and all of those either have an AWAS system or have access to one that's, you know, just a couple of miles away, could they not feed off that, or does it have to be technologically linked so that every farmer has to have a weather system?
Excellent question. Why would every farmer need their own? Two answers. One, well, the first part, yes, I think a lot of those systems you described can be tapped into. Some of the systems are already programmed into these apps, meaning the app can go grab the data without the farmer having to key in anything, which Wesley's busy. He doesn't have time to think about, did I plug in today's rainfall? Well, Wesley would. Others might not. So that might be the answer there. Are they such a system that these apps and these other tools could be programmed to reach out, and I think the term is an API written to go grab that data. The second part, why would you need one? Why does Mr. Dickey need one in most of his field or orchards? Does anyone in South Georgia really believe that thunderstorm that just popped up in South Colquitt County that we get a warning about is affecting Sam Watson in the northwest part of the county? Probably not. They're highly variable, they're spotty in our thunderstorms in the summer. So that's a bit of the issue, is even one that's 10 miles away is often not accurate enough. If, like these apps are, they're driven by accurate rainfall data, hyper-local, field level almost, certainly farm level, farm scale, they may not be good enough for that reason. So that's how I would address that.
What's the cost of a weather system?
And so the cost, good point. So depending on the level you choose, just like with anything, I would say one that is acceptable for this use would be under $2,500, maybe in that $1,200 range. There are a number of models available. Davis Instruments pops in my mind, but there are others, Metos, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that basically just provide rainfall, maybe wind speed, wind direction, that could fill the need for the data needed for these type apps.
Chair Lady Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. A basic question from some non-farmers on this panel. Is there a water quality standard for the water used in irrigation?
Good question. And I'm not a water quality expert. I'm more of a water quantity person. There's always a water quality consideration if you're going to irrigate. Pardon me. You certainly don't water that maybe has too many contaminants. If you're Sam, who stepped out, if you're doing vegetables, you have water quality standards, I think now, based on E. coli and things like that, where you're producing edible vegetables. But if you're doing row crops, you just primarily don't want anything with a wacky pH level or anything of that nature. But I would say, Mark, in our surface and groundwater, I've not heard of water quality issues impeding their use for irrigation in Georgia. So I don't know that there's a standard. Maybe just among farmers, they know if it's good water or not, but I don't think there's necessarily a standard.
Thank you.
Good question, though.
Chairman Hatchett.
So you've got, a lot of these have sensors in the fields that can tell you how much water you need where. Can you apply pesticides, herbicides, nutrients, fertilizer? Can you do that through an irrigation system?
Good question. So in terms of applying those things, those products through, in particular, center pivots or drip irrigation, yes, you can. Senator Watson, I'm sure you put out almost all your fertilizer, maybe some of your crop protection products through the drip. Farmers with center pivots, a tremendous number of corn and sweet corn growers in particular will put out their nitrogen through center pivots. We're seeing research that shows benefit of putting some things like certain fungicides. You can put it out through the center pivot. We've tested other things like insecticides, and as you could imagine, an irrigation system going as fast as it walks, which is very slow, is just throwing out too much water for things like insecticides. But the short answer is yes, a good number of products can be put out and are being put out through irrigation systems. And there are standards in our state for when you do chemigate or fertigate. You don't want backflow putting that product back into the aquifer or the water system.
Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kotzker, for your presentation today. It was very informative. Just a few follow-up questions. We have truly hammered the efficiency and the effectiveness of farming today and how it looks a lot different than it did 40, 50, 60 years ago. When it comes to the adaptation of these new efficiency products, are they making them generally so they adapt to the systems that they currently have, or are farmers having to buy a brand new system every time something new comes out on the market?
That's an excellent point. And I would say in general, most of these systems are able to be utilized on older systems as well as new. Our federal partners had cost share. He talked about cost share for switching from diesel to electric. There's been programs to help growers put more efficient sprinklers on their old center pivots. The variable rate irrigation idea can be used on older center pivots to a point. So I'd say the majority of it can be used on any age system. You don't have to upgrade. There's always some technology out there that maybe does require it, but I would say the vast majority can be used on older systems as well as current or future.
And pivoting real quick, as far as moving the products, once we harvest them, Georgia has been doing an exceptional job with our highway system. I saw it coming in from Albany down here to Moultrie, the full laning of that stretch. Probably should have been done a long time ago, but it's good to see that happening. Are we improving with our ability to move products throughout the South, throughout our agriculture territory? Or what are some of the things we should be concerned about that may be a hindrance from a transportation perspective?
Totally out of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
But I travel the South a lot in my working years, and I think we've done a good job. We've four-laned a lot of roads. We've resurfaced a lot of roads. I think we have a good, personally, I think we have a good system for moving products in general. There's probably always some county roads, et cetera, that maybe are not as good as shape, but state roads, U.S. highways seem to be in really good condition, and they're where they need to be. The four-laning is where it needs to be. But you can always get behind a log truck on a county road, and you may say, why isn't this a four-lane road? But by and large, my opinion is we have a really good system.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to know, out of my ignorance, do we currently provide tax incentives for farmers that are buying this equipment to be more effective and more efficient to help with their water conservation? Are we providing anything on a state level? And if so, if I could, somehow, I guess, get a report of what that is, maybe the budget office can provide that for me. But I would certainly love to see what the state is doing to help farmers that are trying to help us from a water conservation perspective and continue to feed our state and our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other, Chairman Thomas, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, there always comes a point in efficiency where you hit this plateau of diminishing returns. And And based off of what I'm seeing here on some of these charts, it looks like we've kind of leveled out a little bit. But I guess my first question is do you feel like there's enough room left for maybe the next 20 years of return on investment on any of these emerging technologies? Or are we just going to spend a bunch of money and really not really save a whole lot? And I know you don't have a crystal ball. We don't either. I'm not going to hold you to anything, but I am curious.
Right. That's always something you have to think about when you're asking or inquiring, is there state funding or federal funding? Certainly you can't get 100% efficient or zero water use. I will say that our universities and our federal partners are always trying to look at, can our crops be better bred to be more water efficient so we don't have to water as much to begin with? But in terms of applying water, certainly we'll reach a point that we can't achieve a lot more efficiency. And Mark made a good point earlier. Our irrigators are excellent irrigators. So, we brought them, so 100% here, we brought them up in that 90% range. So we've been nibbling at that 10% left, and we did a really good job of helping them continue that. So we may see a slowdown. I don't see a total stop in increasing in efficiency. Adoption of some of these more expensive tools like variable rate irrigation is just at its infancy. And that idea is you're not putting the water where it doesn't need to be. I think there's some opportunity for growth there. And so I get your point, but I think we're not there yet. And I hope not, because there's a lot of good young scientists coming along that are going to have great ideas that are going to push the boundaries even further.
That's good to hear. And the reason why I ask that is, if you're not making it up for an efficiency, then you're going to increase consumption. And that's really kind of one of the key things that we're looking at is okay, fine, we've hit this spot where efficiency is not going to be able to make up for the difference in the demand. So now we're going to see demand take off again. And the curves are great, but they're to date. And I'd love to see maybe offline how we're going to do some projections of kind of what we expect the demand for Georgia agriculture being in the future. So, Mark, I'm going to talk to you. Don't worry about it. Matter of fact, I even went so far as to put you in my phone. So you made it, the elite list. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for the question.
Chairman Dickey.
Thank you. I don't want to be redundant. You've done a wonderful job highlighting the great work farmers across the state have done investing in efficiency for agriculture. And so I want to change it a little bit. Do you think these data centers, who also have different options about cooling their equipment, do you think we should have state standards on their efficiency, on how they cool their equipment and use our limited water resources?
Mr. Chairman, I may have to defer that to someone that knows a lot more about that technology. I'd be ahead of the skis on that, or whatever phrase you want to say. I'm just not qualified to address that. I get what you're saying, but I don't think I could address that. I'm all about water use efficiency and water conservation. How about that?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Dickey. Any other questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
Good information. We have, here's our posture. We have one person for public comment, Mr. Brian Tolar. We'll try and keep that to 5 minutes. Once we conclude that, we'll adjourn the meeting. We've got lunch for the committee. And around 1 o'clock, we'll try to gather up and head out to Bart Davis's farm. And from then, we'll have a site visit, hour-and-a-half site visit, and try and get you out of here back on the road by 2:30. So that's kind of the posture of the committee. Appreciate y'all being here. We'll go to our last public comment, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. So, Brian, the floor is all yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. This is a very important discussion. You've had some excellent speakers today, and it's been a great recap, too, on where we've come. Talk about where we were in, in year 2000, and then moving through 2010 to get to where we are with regional water councils, Strip and Irrigation Research Park success, the Water Stewardship Act, And the question really is, it was brought by Chairman Dickey, and was also mentioned in, Mr. Chairman, your comments about where we go moving forward. Because just as Chairman Thomas mentioned, you know, we're reaching a point where we're plateauing. So we have to find new areas we can conserve, because we have others that want to use our water resources. And that's what I want to talk to you about today as in this public speaking component. Again, I am Brian Toller. Thankfully have been around the water world for a long time. Madam Chair, you, and of course President McCall, leadership, and Richard Royal, I do hope he's watching, a great advocate, and of course our good friend Bob Hanner. And we can't forget Ross Tolleson and his leadership in the state Senate. So we've come a long way, and we should be very proud of that. But where do we go from here? Well, in my capacity now, after years of working in the ag sector, I still continue to work in the ag sector, but a little bit different. And I want to share that with you. I've now worked for clients that are in turf grass and the Georgia Urban Agriculture Council, which is the state's largest trade association for the landscape sector. It also includes horticulture, plant materials, nursery, and as I mentioned, turf grass. So let me mention just one component that will help get us to where we need to go. Georgia's a growing state. There's nothing new about that. We've been growing for a long time. I came to Georgia in 1985 from Texas. And I'm proud of the opportunities that I've had here. And a lot of people feel the very same way. Georgia's a popular place to be, to live, work, and raise a family. And when you raise that family, it means you're going to have a home. You're going to have a community. And a lot of that population center is, of course, in the metro Atlanta area. The document I just passed out to you is a document from the water planning district, the very first water planning district, the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District. And as it outlines in there, when we look at our population growth and the needs for water use, we have a lot of opportunities that we need to look at. Some we can control, water efficiency, we can have a lot of controls for that, but some we can't. And that is when we have a drought. It seems that most of the time we talk about water efficiency when we're in the middle of a drought. The worst possible time to talk about water efficiency. And unfortunately in the past, when we get to metropolitan areas and we get into a drought or a dry spell, the very first thing that they do is they shut off water for those that want to irrigate their lawns, their facilities. Outdoor water use becomes the problem. We saw this during 2007 through 2009. I know we've talked about a lot of droughts here today. On that chart, you see there's a big wide gap in 2007, 2009. And that wide gap was a big problem for our state, but it also was a catalyst for opportunity. And what I want to talk to you today is about what comes out of that catalyst. When you're thrown into the fire, sometimes you can cook up something new. In the University of Georgia, I proudly have on my UGA badge today. The University of Georgia has always been working for new crops, new opportunities. And we have a great turf grass breeding program, probably the most elite in the world, over in Tifton, where I stayed last night. They're always looking for opportunities, and usually they're looking for golf courses or opportunities, because there's a lot of investment in that, right? You want the best. And fortunately, we have the Masters. We just finished the Tour Championship up in Atlanta. And God knows, I know we're all happy for Friday Night Lights and Georgia football coming back this weekend. Those are a big deal, and they all are played on turf grass. Well, one of the grasses that they were looking at, going back into the 1990s, was about drought opportunities. How do we get more efficiency in water products out of our turf grasses? But it was that drought in 2009 that saw USDA invest a bunch of money into the University of Georgia, along with the fundings that y'all provide, that they started accelerating their efforts. And those efforts generated a plant out of Tifton called Tif-Tuff. It's a Bermuda grass that uses 38% less water than the most commonly used Bermuda grass, not only in our state, but across the South. Now, if you think about water efficiency, you think about the metropolitan area, not just Atlanta. Of course, over in Columbus, we've got Macon, we've got Savannah, and we've got Tifton is growing as well. We've got a lot of places that can benefit. If we start using the right types of grasses to save water, reduce our irrigation needs for our landscapes, people can, number one, they can have what they want. They want a nice home, they want a nice lawn, they want nice playing surfaces for their pets and for their children. But number two, we can do it with a lot less impact on our resources. So I'm not here to try to get you to go buy a TIF-Tuff for your property. There's a lot of people already doing that. Over the last decade, we've sold 2.5 billion square feet has been sold and installed all across the U.S. We don't need to increase sales of grass. What we need to do is we need to increase the knowledge of the opportunities of saving water by making the right choices. And TIF-Tuff is by far the leading grass for drought tolerance, but there are others. We're not the only ones out there with a product. Oklahoma has generated a couple of grasses, Tahoma 31 and one called Iron Cutter. They're not as prevalent, but we do grow Tahoma 31 in Georgia along with TIF-Tuff. But there are options available for our consumer market. There are options for our developers. There are options for educators. So what can we do? I know this is something that was asked by the panel earlier. What can we do to invest in what's next? Whether it's a cost share, we heard a lot about cost share today with our producers to help them be more efficient, not only with water, but also with energy. But think about our communities where maybe a cost share could be done to help with increasing efficiencies in those urban areas. We've spent a lot of time and a lot of money for enhancing low-flow toilets, low-flow shower heads, washing machines, you name it, right? A lot of these are now required, part of the building code. But when it comes to our outdoor landscapes, we don't have any requirements, and I'm not saying that we need any, but perhaps we need recommendations. And what I passed out to you today is really something that's innovative for the Metro Water Planning District, is that they have this document that they didn't have. This was only created just last year. But to be able to tell people, and you'll see in that text down below, it talks about how you can save water, and one of those ways to do that is to use a drought-tolerant turf grass such as TIF-Tuff. They also, working with the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service, developed a landscape guide for the Piedmont. And in this guide, the only turf grass that's mentioned is TIF-Tuff, because they want to drive the message about water conservation in the landscape, and certainly with turf grass. So that's my message to you today, is we don't often think about outdoor water use and how we can reduce the impact of that resource being utilized in that way. We have to give up something, right? We had to, in 2007, 2009, we had to give up outdoor water use. We had to give up our landscape, and we had billions of dollars of economic impact to our turf grass and nursery sectors. It was devastating for those communities. It was devastating for those growers. But now we have other options. And if we take that information, we take that education, what University of Georgia has generated for us to use, and we spread that message, other universities, their continued research will build, this is the next level. This is where we see where we can go. We can continue the message of conservation. We can deliver on that. And Mr. Chairman, Chairman Dickey, I hope that all the water we're saving doesn't go for data centers, but there's efficiencies that can be made there. But honestly, if we don't keep doing our own efforts to be more efficient, then it's hard to point the finger and say, well, we did ours, you do yours. We all have to serve in that space, and we all can with technology and research. So thank you very much for the opportunity. If anybody has a question, I'll yield to them. I know we're running short on time.
Any questions? Thank you, Brian. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, to the committee, thank y'all for being here. We're going to adjourn the committee now, have lunch, and then meet back up about 1 o'clock. Meeting's adjourned.